This is one of the last Mamar the Rebbe ever said. This is recited in Pesach at the Mashiach Suda Verbrengen. The year was 1989, Tashmem Tes. The Rebbe later was Mugga. The Rebbe edited this Mamar. And it is deceptively simplistic. Exceptionally deep insight into the Rebbe's way of thinking and the Rebbe's approach to the world, Torah, mitzvahs, Yiddishkeit, and the future. At least that's what I think, my humble opinion. So the Mamar opens with the words Vehecherim Havaya es l'shein Mitzrayim. This is a quote from the Pasuk of Yeshayahu, the prophecies of Isaiah in chapter 11. Isaiah speaks of the future as much of his prophecies do. And in describing the reality that will unfold when Mashiach will come, he refocuses back to the original redemption of the Jewish people. And he says that God will, like Vehecherim means to destroy or tear apart, L'shein Yam Mitzrayim, the tongue of the Sea of Egypt. So this refers, according to most of the Mefarshim, as the rivers that are at the top, at the north part of Egypt, which comes straight off the ocean. So it seems like the Nile River initially, the early tributaries are still somewhat saltwater-like as they're fed by the ocean, and then eventually it becomes all sweet water. So this is called L'shein Mitzrayim. It's like the tongue. It's like the ocean sticking a tongue down into Mitzrayim. Right, so it's an extension. So this tongue will be divided or ripped apart or destroyed. And then it says Vehenif Yodei al Hanor. He will raise his hand, and most of the Mefarshim say Ba'im Ruche means with strength, or with strength of spirit. And the pasuk concludes that the river will be divided into divided seven times, and that will walk in shoes, which is meant to be a euphemism that will walk on dry land. The Rebbe Marash, the fourth Rebbe of the Chabad dynasty, who the Rebbe would often refer to as which means to begin with, above and beyond. The Rebbe Marash famously used to say, "The Welt sagt, as mdavgein lachatchila arunter." So initially you try to skirt issues and problems, and then, if it doesn't work, so then you go Riber, then you just climb the fence. But Irzag, you said, I say lechatchila Rebbe. You just start off to begin with, just above and beyond, straight over the top. Anyway, so the Rebbe Marash explains at great length in a hemshech called Vehecherim, which is a continuation of Mamar, which opens with these very words. The Neisef Shala Asad Lave Yi Vehecherim Gamer. Besides the fact that there will be Vehecherim, so that Hashem will dry up or remove or split, however you want to translate the word Vehecherim. Es l'shein Mitzrayim, Yam Mitzrayim, the tongue of the Sea of Egypt, which this is Dugmas Kriyas Yamsuf. This is in the image of the splitting of the Reed Sea. So the Reed Sea was also was salt water. It was actually, we believe that's the Sea of Reeds, or the Red Sea as it's euphemistically called, is on the other side, but that's the water divided, that sea split open. So Dugmas, the idea of Kriyas Yamsuf, and the paradigm and the image of Kriyas Yamsuf, when Mashiach will come, also there'll be a division of L'shein Yam Mitzrayim. And just as it was Shahoisabi Yetzias Mitzrayim, just as it was when the Jewish people left Egypt the first time, so in addition to the Vehecherim, which is a replication or a reenactment of the original splitting of the sea, and this will happen when Mashiach will come. So in addition to this, there's a secondary or another thing that the verse speaks of. Not only Vehecherim Havaya es l'shein Yam Mitzrayim, not only God will tear open the idea of the tongue of the Sea of Egypt, but also Vehenif Yodei al Hanor, he'll raise his hand over the river, and it'll divide, as mentioned, into seven, or according to the Adak, many more than seven. Seven is just a number, many more times. So the Rebbe Marash emphasizes that these are two different events, two different things. The B'kiyas Hanor, he says, the dividing of the river, which presumably is the Nile, according to most of the commentaries, Hu'l'mayla yoser mi B'kiyas Hayom, is loftier, higher than the splitting of the sea. So the splitting of sea and then splitting of river, and splitting of river is loftier, is more impressive than splitting of the sea. Like it's explained over there at great length, the year was 1871, and the Rebbe Marash delivers this long string of Mamarim that opens up with this very verse. The Rebbe Marash goes on to say that Ikar HaChidish L'Asad Lavi, that the primary novelty of the future, when Mashiach will come, is that will be Sh'az Yeh B'Kiyas Hanar. The splitting of the sea was already. So there'll be a splitting of the sea again. But the primary chiddush, the real novelty is that when Mashiach will come, not only will the sea split, the river will split also. Ukamesha Kasav, as it is written. And this is found in the 66th Psalm of David HaMelech's Book of Tehillim, that it says, Hofach Yam Layabasha. He turned the sea into dry land. And then the second half of the pasuk is, Banohar Ya'avru Berogel. In the river, they will walk through by foot. So Hofach Yam Layabasha. The sea was turned into dry land, L'shen Avar. That's past tense. The Koyal Kriyas Yamsuf. This refers to the splitting of the sea. Hafach Yam. Hafach, not Yahafach. Not he will. Hafach. It's already done. It's past tense. The sea was split. Now we speak of what will be in the future. Banor Yavru. The Hafach Yam, the changing of the sea, that was Begeulu de Yitzias Mitzrayim. This took place in the original Exodus, the original redemption, which was at the time when we left Mitzrayim. However, Banor Yavru Barogel, the idea of walking through the river, this is La'asid Laveh. This will happen in the future that's yet to come. The Koyal B'Kiyas HaNahar, this refers to the division of the river, Shatiya Begeulu Asida. It will happen in the future redemption through Mashiach. Ubenor Yavru Barogel, and the idea in the river they will walk by foot. Zeu Iker Achidish, this is the primary novelty. Sheyiyah Begeula Asida, something that wasn't, that will be. So there was what was, and then what was will be. But that's not such a chiddush, that's not such a novelty. If it was already, so it is again. Seeing replication is not such a novelty. Something new, something fresh, something different, this is a real chiddush. So if somebody wants to know, encapsulate for me in some kind of prophetic poetry what Mashiach's coming will be like, so we'll say, you know what? The river will divide. That's the euphemism. That's the poetry that describes for us in a fuller sense the chiddush, the novelty in the time of Mashiach. This is a very brief synopsis of an extremely long, nuanced, and detailed Hasidic rumination, a discourse, a maamer from the Rebbe Marash. Extremely brief. It doesn't go into explain the difference here. What is Kriyas Yamsuf? What is Yam? What is Nar? What does sea represent? All of this is representation. It's all metaphor. Besides being literal, it has an enormous amount of profundity and depth. The Rebbe just glosses over. It doesn't go into the details here. This is what was. What was is called Kriyas Yamsuf. Whatever that means, that's not today's subject. What will be is B'kiyas HaNar. Again, that's not today's subject. Okay. So here, the Rebbe begins to offer us something fresh and new, which is kind of based on what the previous Rabbeim gave us, but really very, very different, as you'll see. V'yesh Leimer. So V'yesh Leimer is the way the Rebbe introduces a chiddush and a maamer. V'yesh Leimer is, perhaps we can say, but we famously know that once the Frierdiker Rebbe repeated a maamer that the Rebbe Rashab, that his father said, and the Rebbe Rashab had said V'yesh Leimer, maybe we can say, and the Rebbe Rashab, Frierdiker Rebbe said over the maamer, this is how it is. So the Rebbe said, I only said V'yesh Leimer, or maybe V'ula Yesh Leimer, it could be. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, was by you, or maybe is by me for sure. Because the Rebbe says V'yesh Leimer, if the Rebbe said maybe we could say, for us, this is how it is. So, but this is how you know when the Rebbe is introducing a chiddush and a maamer, the Rebbe says the words V'yesh Leimer. So V'yesh Leimer, the Zesh of Vehecherim Goymer Yam Mitzrayim. That the fact that we talk of the division, or it's kind of like doing away of the sea, Vehecherim, of the Yam Mitzrayim, of the Sea of Egypt. Mamshich lazeh, that the verse continues. V'tekef, it's not a new verse, it's a continuation of the very same verse. Zu gesund. Vehenif zum Leben. Vehenif yadei al hanor, that he raises his hand above the river. Hulahayres, this comes to indicate shemikriyas yamsuf. That from the splitting of the sea and all that it represents, shahayu b'hageula d'yatzias Mitzrayim, which was at the time of the Exodus, of the redemption from Mitzrayim, efshalav miyad b'lishum hefsek, we are able to come without any kind of interruption. It's a seamless continuation to vehenif yadei al hanar sheyil lasad lavei, to the raising of the hand over the river, which will be in the future. In other words, the Rebbe is not going into the details of Yam and Nohar, of sea and river. The Rebbe is not explaining the difference of Vehecherim or Vehenif Yodei Ba'im Ruchei, of doing away with, or like kind of removing the sea, the yam, the sea, versus the idea of raising his hand over the river with great force, with the force of spirit. That's not the point. Whatever that means. And you want to learn that Mamar, go to Vehecherim from 1871 and learn that Mamar, and you'll know all the details of what it means. That's not the point. What we can extrapolate from there is that one represents what was, and one represents what will be. One represents the past redemption, one represents what occurred to our ancestors, the other is speaking of what will happen, please God, very soon to us. What the Rebbe is noting is, it's in the same verse. If they're two different things, separated by at least 33 centuries, because that happened 33,331 years ago, and Mashiach, if he comes right now, it's still going to be 3,331 years later. Hopefully it's not more than that. So it's a big gap. That's a pretty long time. And the fact that it gets conflated into a single verse, and that it's like this seamless moving from antiquity into the postmodern era, from what was Ayim to all of a sudden Geula Yedei Mashiach, from Exodus to redemption through Mashiach. That's in one verse. The Rebbe says, from this we can see that it is possible that one should naturally flow into the other without any kind of interruption. What is the Rebbe trying to say? The Rebbe is saying to us that redemption is at hand, that it's not distant. In other words, if we're commemorating Yetzias Mitzrayim now, then it's only natural that we should begin to speak of and think about and the Meretz Hashem experience the Geula through Mashiach. It's a natural continuation. It's an organic extension. Ubefrat, this is especially true on Achron Shel Pesach, on the last day of Pesach. Sheboi, that on this last day of Pesach, Omrim Haftorah Be'inyan Geula HaSida, that the Haftorah, the additional reading that was selected to accompany the Torah reading, speaks virtually exclusively and entirely about the future redemption. So we know that the sages chose, as a rule, a Haftorah that would reflect the spirit of the Parsha, or what's read, the Torah that's read, the spirit of the day. So we have reasons, for example, why we read about particular Haftorahs on the Shabbos of Chol HaMoed Sukkos, for example, when we read about the war of Gog and Magog. It has nothing to do with Sukkos. But then it does have to do with Sukkos. Why? Because Rabbi Hai had a tradition that we will experience the convulsions of Gog and Magog in the month of Tishrei. So you have this Shabbos, which is on Sukkot, which is a holiday and represents an overarching theme of Sukkot. Okay, so that's how we ended up with that Haftarah. Or we have a Haftarah that on Pesach that speaks of the first Korban Pesach when we left Mitzrayim. That's in the Torah reading, and then the next reading is the next great Korban Pesach, which is the Korban Pesach of Yehoshua, when the Jewish people came into Mitzrayim. But then the Haftarah the second day, which is the great Korban Pesach and the rejuvenation that happened to our nation during the times of Yoshiyahu HaMelech. There's a connection. There's a Pesach connection. Pesach represents renewal. Pesach always comes in the month of spring, so it represents the idea of spiritual renewal, being able to leap forward, being able to let go of previous Mitzrayim. It naturally reflects the theme of Pesach and the essence, the lessons that this holiday brings us. So the last day of Pesach, which is the climax and the conclusion, like the Gemara says, everything follows the closing. We don't speak about Yetzias Mitzrayim or Pesach, Passover-like verses or themes at all. We focus entirely on the future of Mashiach coming. So this tells us that the last day of Pesach is very much connected to the coming of Mashiach. We have this tradition from the Baal Shem Tov that we eat Seudas Mashiach, a special third meal, which usually we don't necessarily consume on Yom Tov. It's only for Shabbos, the Seudah Shlishit, the third meal. And yet, that third meal that's consumed on Pesach is uniquely referred to as the Seudah of Mashiach. So you say, okay, fine. So that's a gullus thing. That's because we're outside of Mitzrayim. It's an add-on. It's tacked on. It's not really Passover. Well, the Rebbe says no, but it is really Pesach because Zeba behemshech l'shvi shel Pesach. This comes as a direct continuation of the seventh day of Pesach, Kriyas Yamsuf, which celebrates and commemorates the crossing of the Red Sea, the splitting of the ocean. Shal yedei zanasa oid yoser hachiber the Kriyas Yamsuf im hageula hasida, which that links together since the 8th day of Pesach comes as a continuation of the 7th day of Pesach, and the 7th day of Pesach commemorates the splitting of the Red Sea, and since the 8th day of Pesach is kind of hyper-focused on the coming of Mashiach, and since the 8th day of Pesach comes after the 7th day of Pesach, which commemorates the splitting of the Reed Sea. So that only reinforces the natural link between Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, with the Gula Asida. Okay, so what the Rebbe seems to be saying is that because we're able to celebrate Pesach, we should be able to relate to a future through Mashiach. Just as Pesach is not supposed to be distant to us, just as we say, B'chol der v'der chayiv adam liris es atzmei, that in every generation a person has an obligation to see his or herself as if they left the land of Mitzrayim. And just as we have a sacred duty to personalize the Pesach message, like the Alter Rebbe says, B'chol yom v'yom, it's really a daily process of going out of Mitzrayim, of experiencing inner transformation. The Yetzias Mitzrayim is a defining hallmark of who we are as Jewish people, that we have like literally a dozen mitzvahs, which are all the Zeicher Yetzias Mitzrayim, that we have the sacred duty of mentioning and remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim every day of our lives, besides speaking about it at great length and discussing the process on the night of the Seder. So Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is such a critical part of who we are as Jews, which is such an intrinsic part of our celebration of Yiddishkeit and our observance of our legacy, so just as that's critical and foundational, so is the coming of Mashiach. And the coming of Mashiach should be so real to us that if Pesach is real to us, what happened 3,300 years ago, still it's real to us. We have to make it real. We go through the process, we act it out. We're eating this Pesach matzah mar, we're doing all these things to make it real. So if that's real to us, if the past is real, then the future has to be real. We can't just believe in a nebulous idea, yeah, Mashiach will come. Our grandchildren will see Mashiach. Someday Mashiach will come. If it's just something distant that has no relevance to us, we missed the point. It has to be as real as Pesach. Pesach is not in hand, and yet we take these pains to make it real. Well, Mashiach may not be in hand, but we still have to take the pains to live with the idea of Mashiach, to realize that it is the natural extension. If there's Pesach, there's Mashiach. If there's a Geula Rishona, if there's a first redemption, there's a second redemption. And really, they're not separate, different, and apart. There isn't a gulf to bridge. It's just this natural flow. So at this point, you might say that's really nice. So the Rebbe is living in the clouds, the Rebbe is living in the heavens. And for the Rebbe, Mashiach is a reality. But for the rest of us, we have other realities. We live profoundly godless lives. And since we live profound godless lives, so in our godless world, we're listening to a tzaddik speak of his reality. That the tzaddik lives with a spirit of redemption. There are famous stories of tzaddikim. I think it was Rebbe Melech of Lezhensk, maybe. The Kosovo Rebbe once came to an inn, and he said, "Who stayed in this room before me? Who stayed? Somebody stayed in this room before me." And hundreds of people. No, somebody very special. And I think it was Rebbe Melech of Lezhensk once stayed in this room. And he said, "How did you know? How did you know a tzaddik stayed there?" He said, "Because every time I hear a clock tick, the clock is ticking like closer to demise. It's like time elapsing. But I hear this clock ticking, I hear it closer to Mashiach." Okay, you have to be like the Kosovo Rebbe to hear the clock ticking, and like the regular person just hears the clock ticking. There's this famous story of Rabbi Mendel of Vitebsk, who was the senior disciple of the Maggid of Mizitch, who leads the first modern Aliyah to Israel in the year 1776. And later he can't come, they don't let him into Jerusalem, the wonderful Arabs living there. So they're forced to go north, and they end up living in Tiberias and Tzfas. And there is a condition, if you Google it, you'll see it's called Jerusalem syndrome. It's when people go nuts from living in a holy place, from all faith systems, and do everything from disrobe to mounting horses and sounding trumpets and thinking they're Mashiach. But what they don't talk about is the Tzfas syndrome, which I think is even more profound and more dangerous. It's very high in the mountains, very thin air. A lot of people go crazy there. So there was this guy in the time of Rebbe Mendel Vitebsk who apparently breathed too deeply, and he snapped. And he put a talus on, and he went onto a white donkey, and he rode to some hilltop, and there he was blowing his shofar. And the people in Tzfas heard the shofar, and the imagery is very compelling, dramatic imagery of some guy draped in a talus and a white donkey and blowing a shofar. They said, "Mashiach is it, Mashiach is it." The streets went crazy. And the word reaches the Mendel Paradaka, the Mendel Vitebsker, and the story goes, they said, "Mashiach is there, Mashiach is it, Mashiach is it." Goes over to the windows, they couldn't afford glass, they had shutters. And he throws open the shutters, and he sticks his head out the window. I said, "No, Mashiach's not here. Kinderlach, go back to work. Mashiach's not here." So the famous question is if Rebbe Mendel could just smell and know if the atmosphere changed, why did he have to throw open the shutters? Why did he have to get up? And the answer is that at Mendel's table, Mashiach was there. He was breathing the air of Mashiach. He was experiencing that on a personal level. So I said the Rebbe is telling us that there's this idea that Mashiach's at hand. The Rebbe sees the redemption. He sees the Geula. He's already at the summit. He sees the other side. No. The Rebbe says, 1 second. This closeness of what we're talking about, the idea of Kriyas Yamsuf, of Vehecherim Havayas L'Shoin Yamitzayim, which refers to what was, and this next thing, which refers to what will be, Vehenif Yadei, it's a pasuk in Torah. If it's a pasuk in Torah, if this closeness is organic to the Torah itself, so then it's Yerusha l'kol echad ve'echad mi'Yisrael, then it has to be inheritance of every single Yid. K'mei shekosov, like it's written, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, me'rasha kilas Yankiv. It says that the Torah was instructed to us by Moshe, and we know, of course, the Gemara in Makkas tells us that Torah is the gematria of 611, and that's because there are 630 mitzvahs. The first two we heard from God Himself, Anechi Hashem Elokecha, and Lo Yilecha, and the next 611 we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu. So these 611 that we heard from Moshe, which of course includes the entire Torah, Morasha, it's an inheritance for Kehilas Yaakov, for the congregation of Jacob. So that means an inheritance, and as the Rebbe would always talk about this pasuk and emphasize that whether you're an hour old or 100 years old, if you are the inheritor, you are the inheritor. If you're the sole heir, you get it all. It's all yours. It doesn't have to. You don't have to go through a process. You don't have to acquire it. It is yours. If you're the heir, you're the heir. End the story. So if we talk about Torah as an inheritance, obviously nobody died for this, but we still use the concept of inheritance. It's to kind of convey this notion that the Torah is seamlessly yours. It's instantaneously yours by virtue of your birth, by virtue of being. It's yours. Well, in that case, then it's a part of Torah. It's not only a certain part of Torah that belongs to every Yid. All of Torah belongs to every Yid, including the fact that Yeshayahu HaNavi, in his Nevuah, said these psukim in corollary, imperfect corollary, like literally one half of a verse and the other half of a verse. That David HaMelech in Psalm 66 says the same thing, really. Also, but they're also in two halves of a single verse. That means Yeshna HaKoyach L'Kol Echad V'Echad Mi'Yisrael. And the Rebbe saw this not as in the domain of tzaddikim, but this is the domain of every single Yid. Anoshim, Noshim, V'Taf, men, women, and even children. That they should come loving Mikriyas Yamsuf. That from the celebration and commemoration of the splitting of the sea, they should come take it from Miyad Mamash L'Gula Sida. We should simply step. The next step is redemption, total redemption. L'Ikov, without any kind of delay. Afilu Kehedafai, not even the blink of an eye. Now, so, as the Rebbe demonstrates, that if this is in the purview of every single Yid, and because it's in the purview of every Yid, regardless who he or she is. So we're talking about a Yid who supports BDS. We're talking about a Yid who's self-hating. The kind of Yid who said, going out of Mitzrayim, let me throw myself into the sea and commit suicide. The kind of Yid who today speaks in the same suicidal terms. We're talking about the most horrible Jew you know. We're talking about him too, because he's also a member of Am Yisrael. And if he's a member of Am Yisrael, Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe Merash Kilas Yankiv is his too. We may not like this. We're not comfortable with it, maybe, but that's the truth. So that Yid can come literally in less than the blink of an eye, from being as distant from Hashem as a human being possibly can be, to being in a pure, redeemed state. Take it from Yad La'Gila Digula Asida to the ultimate redemption. And this is mudgeshes. This is also emphasized. Gamba mashakosov b'haftorah d'achashal Pesach. What else does it say in achashal Pesach? So now, talk before about the idea that the haftorah of achashal Pesach emphasizes the coming of Mashiach. The Rebbe then went on to say that because it's a pasuk in Torah, this is something that's the domain of every single Yid. So the natural link between Kriyas Yamsuf and achashal Pesach is organic. It's right there. The link between what was and what will be, straight, move without any kind of interruption. The Rebbe says the Haftarah emphasizes this notion that it's connected and in the hand for every single Yid. Why? Because one of the psukim we speak of in the Haftarah is the idea of V'nocha olav ruach Hashem, that the Spirit of God will rest on him. This is Nocha olav ruach Havaya. The Spirit of God is talking about the olav, who's olav on him, Kayal Mashiach. That refers to Mashiach. As it says the pasuk before, a shoot will come forth from the trunk of Jesse, of Yishai. That's Mashiach. But the Afal Pikain, despite the fact that this pasuk uniquely and specifically speaks about Mashiach, the Chayter Megeza Yishai, the shoot from the sapling from the trunk of Yishai, which is a direct descendant of David HaMelech, At the same time, Tiknu, our sages instituted Shekol Echad Yisrael, that every single Yid Yomer B'Yom says this on Yom Tov in the Tefillah that we say when the urn is opened, which the Tefillah recited when the ark is open is anyway to begin with a very profound and spiritual holy moment when the ark is open, representing the doors of heaven that are open. And when the doors of heaven are open and the ark is open, and what are we saying? V'yiskayim banu mikra should be fulfilled within us, the pasuk that says v'nach olav ruach havaya, that the Spirit of God should rest upon him. In other words, we're saying with the open of the ark, a serious moment, and we're speaking about v'nach olav ruach havaya. That pasuk speaks about Mashiach. How did it get to me? But every single yid says v'yiskayim banu, it should be fulfilled in us. Hainu, that is to say, simply stated, shebekol echad miyisrael, that every single yid, b'tur prat, as an individual, as a detail within the plurality and totality of the Jewish people, that should be within him redemption, should be within him the spirit of Hashem, of Havaya, which is unique to Mashiach himself. With all these differences, what else did the Psukim say? What else will happen when the spirit of Havaya will come upon him? The idea of raising his hand, the idea of Mashiach. Alright, so how do we make this happen? So now we know how the Rebbe looks at every Yid. Now we know how the Rebbe looks at redemption. Now the Rebbe looks at reality. He doesn't look at reality like we look at reality. He says reality is what it could be. Reality is what it should be. The question is, how do we make that? The Rebbe says, what do you mean? How do you make it? This is in your hands. It's our actions. It's our efforts. You do a mitzvah right, nasa geula. Every mitzvah is an act of redemption. Every mitzvah opens the shackles of Golus. It represents geula prata shel mekayim mitzvah. When a yid does a mitzvah, regardless of who he or she is, as long as he or she is doing a mitzvah, when a child does a mitzvah, that is a redemptive moment. The spirit soars. The neshama is released from its shackles at the moment you're doing a mitzvah. The moment you do a mitzvah, you are connected to Hashem. The moment you do a mitzvah, your neshama is set free. That's what a mitzvah is. That in the moment of the mitzvah, Yid finds himself in a state of true redemption. Kimuvur, like it's explained in the Igeres HaKodesh, in the Pirush HaKosav, in the meaning of the verse of Tillim, Pada B'Shalom Nafshi. So the Rebbe goes on, and we're out of time unfortunately, to speak about how every single mitzvah is called an eternal union, a moment of eternity, and that mitzvah, which is a moment of eternity, it's not only a moment of an infinitude where we connect to the highest levels of truth and reality to that moment, but actually the impact of a mitzvah is lasting. A diamond is not forever. That's the beer's drei cup, in your cup. But a mitzvah is forever. A mitzvah really is forever. And a mitzvah done can never be taken away from you. Every mitzvah is forever. And because every mitzvah is forever, and because every mitzvah is a moment, a second, a frame in which there is a redemptive reality, that means each and every time we do a mitzvah, we're able to actualize this. So here, what's the Rebbe's strategy? Let's take a guy, first put him in yeshiva, take a woman and put her in a seminary, and then maybe after a year they'll put on tefillin or light Shabbos candles, and then eventually they'll come around to realize, and then they become frum. Then Mashiach can come. No, my friends, that's not the Rebbe's strategy. What's the Rebbe's strategy? Do a mitzvah. You find a Yid, Shalom Aleichem, you do a mitzvah. I don't like mitzvahs, I know, but do a mitzvah anyway. Because the moment somebody does a mitzvah, that's a moment of redemption. And redemption is not a distant thing. Redemption is here, redemption is now, redemption is at hand. The strategy, a mitzvah. And then mitzvah, Gederes mitzvah, and one mitzvah. And as long as we keep doing mitzvahs, we'll be just fine. It's just like, I once saw a silly meme. It says, sobriety is the annoying moments between my highs, which is a ridiculous meme, of course. But the point is, we should have mitzvah highs all the time. You should always be in a mitzvah. So I'm always doing a mitzvah. So if you're always doing a mitzvah from one mitzvah to the next mitzvah, there's no time in between to get down. Why? Because you're on a mitzvah high. And if a mitzvah, you're always living within mitzvahs, you're always doing mitzvahs and bringing mitzvahs, so you're living in a redeemed state. If you're living in a redeemed state, that's how we actualize this reality, and it is real. The Rebbe's point to us in this Mamar is it's real. It's as real as we have to commemorate Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's as real as we have to accelerate and catalyze the coming of Mashiach. B'mheira will be Ameinu. Amen. Good Yom Tov to all of our listeners, wherever they may be. And we should indeed meet in the third base of Mikdash. B'mheira will be Ameinu. Amen. As Pesach concludes.